Sometimes, the people who hurt you the most don't come with a warning. They come with a hug, with a smile, with a family photo from 20 years ago. They ask you how you've been right after draining your energy. They say, "I love you," right before crossing your boundaries again, and you let it slide. Not because you're weak, but because you were raised to confuse love with endurance. But here's the Stoic truth. Being a good person does not mean being a doormat, and unconditional love doesn't mean unconditional tolerance. There are behaviors that cross the line, even if they come from your own blood. In this video, we'll explore 5 specific behaviors you should never tolerate from anyone, not your partner, not your boss, and not even your family. Because, in the words of Epictetus, you are not harmed by what others do. You are harmed when you allow it to continue. So, if you've ever walked away from a conversation feeling smaller, quieter, or like you're slowly disappearing from your own life, this video is for you. Let's begin. It never begins with a shout. It begins with a sigh. Why do you always do it that way, that shirt again? You really think that's a good idea? One comment here, another tomorrow, then another the next week. Until one day, you find yourself second-guessing your own voice. You pause before you speak. You filter yourself in real time, not because you're unsure, but because someone has slowly taught you that you are always slightly wrong. That is not feedback. That is erosion. There is a difference between guidance and control. Constructive feedback is focused, kind, and rooted in a desire to build. Constant criticism is vague, repetitive, and always targeted at who you are, not what you do. You can hear it in the tone. You feel it in your gut. It doesn't sharpen you, it shrinks you. In families, it comes wrapped in comparisons. Your cousin already bought a house. Your sister never talks back. In relationships, it comes wrapped in sarcasm. Relax. I'm just being honest. You're too sensitive. In the workplace, it comes wrapped in perfectionism. You did this, but next time, maybe don't. Good job still. I wish you were more like. And here's the trap. The more familiar it becomes, the more you normalize it. You stop noticing the ache. You stop fighting the silence. And eventually, you start editing yourself just to survive in the relationship. But Stoicism teaches us, what you allow, you teach. And if you allow someone to erode your worth in small doses, day after day, you are silently handing them the permission to continue. Epictetus once said, "No one can harm you without your consent." Criticism that targets your dignity is not a teaching tool. It is a form of subtle domination. So how do you respond? You start by recognizing the feeling, that tension in your chest, the fatigue after the conversation, the shrinking of your posture. These are not overreactions. They are warning signs. And your soul has been trying to tell you for a long time that something doesn't feel right. You don't need to scream. You don't need to explain. You simply need to draw a line with calm, with clarity, and with conviction, because the longer you tolerate constant criticism, the more you lose access to your inner voice. And if you lose that, you lose the compass that guides your whole life. Do not confuse endurance with wisdom. Do not confuse politeness with peace. Sometimes, healing begins with a sentence as simple as this: "That felt like criticism, not care." Say it once, then step back and watch who chooses to meet you with respect and who only knew how to engage through control. It always starts small. A late-night call that you didn't ask for. An uninvited opinion about your life. Someone borrowing your time, your energy, or your space without ever asking first. You brush it off. You tell yourself, "It's not that big of a deal," but deep down, something feels off. Something inside you whispers, "This isn't okay." You silence that voice because it's your parent, because it's your sibling, because it's someone who says they love you. But here's the truth: love without respect is just possession. And if someone refuses to honor your boundaries, they're not loving you, they're managing you. I once knew a man whose mother showed up at his home unannounced every week. She had a key. She'd walk in, rearrange things, comment on his groceries, open his mail. When he finally asked her to call before visiting, she laughed and said, "I'm your mother. I don't need permission." That sentence stayed with him for years, not because it was loud, but because it was revealing. It told him everything about how she saw him as an extension of herself, not as a separate, ein human being. This is what boundary violation looks like. Not just bold, disrespectful acts, but subtle patterns that say, "What matters to you doesn't matter to me." And the longer you allow it, the more you forget that your time, space, and emotional energy belong to you. Some people cross boundaries because they were never taught what boundaries are. They were raised in environments where love meant access, where privacy meant rejection, where closeness meant control. But others, they know exactly what they're doing. They don't burst through your limits. They test them. They lean in just enough. They apologize just enough. They twist your empathy into guilt until you become a yes machine. And when you finally say no, they say, "Wow, you've changed." But what they really mean is, "You stopped letting me control you." Stoicism teaches us that boundaries are not about pushing people away. They're about protecting what's worth keeping close. Your peace, your focus, your soul. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." But I'd argue it also becomes colored by the people we allow in unfiltered. So how do you respond? You start by shifting the energy. When someone crosses a line, don't explain your worth. Clarify your standard. You say, "Please don't come over without calling. I'm not comfortable with that topic. I'm not available right now." Simple, direct, no apologies. And then comes the most important part: follow through. Because boundaries without consequences are just suggestions. If someone continues to cross the line after you've made it clear, you don't owe them more warnings, you owe yourself action. Limit the time. Shift the dynamic. Or, if needed, walk away entirely. Stoic strength isn't about building walls. It's about drawing lines with quiet conviction and having the discipline to stand by them. Because the moment you stop treating your boundaries as optional, you teach others how to love you in a way that's real. Not through guilt, not through obligation, but through respect. Some wounds don't bleed. They don't bruise. They don't leave marks that others can see. But they're there, in the way you question your memory, in the way you second-guess your own emotions, in the way you start a sentence with, "Maybe I'm just being too sensitive," even though deep down, you know you're not. That's the power of gaslighting. And it's one of the most dangerous forms of manipulation, because it doesn't destroy you from the outside. It dismantles you from within. It usually starts with small contradictions. "I never said that." "You're imagining things." "Don't be so dramatic." You walk away from conversations feeling off. Like you lost an argument you didn't even know you were in. Like your brain is being rewired. But you can't explain how. And over time, you begin to question your own reality. You ask, was I really wrong? Maybe I'm too emotional. Maybe I am the problem. No, you're not. You're being played. Gaslighting is not a misunderstanding. It's a strategy. It's a way of turning your clarity into confusion, your confidence into doubt, your voice into silence. And the person who uses it, they don't want communication. They want control. They win when you start keeping score with yourself instead of with them. They win when your truth becomes negotiable, when your reality becomes a courtroom, and they're the judge. But here's the Stoic truth. Your mind is the fortress, and no one, no matter how charming, how close, or how subtle, has the right to occupy it without permission. Epictetus once said, if someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. That doesn't mean the abuse is your fault. It means your power begins when you stop letting them define the terms of reality. So what can you do? You stop debating. Gaslighters aren't interested in truth. They're interested in dominance. Instead of arguing, observe. Start writing things down. Track their words. Track your reactions. Not for revenge, but for clarity. Talk to someone outside the dynamic. Someone you trust. Someone who will say, no, you're not crazy. That actually happened. That moment when your memory is validated is when healing begins. And finally, set a line. Not a threat, not a speech. A boundary with consequences. If the pattern repeats, you don't need to scream. You just need to step back, detach, reclaim your mind. Because gaslighting doesn't steal your power all at once. It takes it slowly, one small moment at a time, until one day you stop recognizing yourself. But today, you see it, you feel it, and from this moment forward, you refuse to betray your own mind to keep someone else comfortable. This isn't weakness. This is wisdom. And the moment you trust yourself again, you become someone no manipulator can touch. There's a moment, and you'll never forget it, when someone looks you in the eye and lies to you. Not a mistake, not a white lie, but a deliberate, calculated distortion of the truth. And something inside you breaks. Not just your trust in them, but your trust in yourself. Because if they can lie with that much ease, you start wondering, what else have I missed? Was any of it real? Here's the thing about dishonesty. It rarely shows up as one giant betrayal. No, it's more clever than that. It comes in drops. A skip detail, a story that changes slightly, a promise they forgot again. At first, you give them the benefit of the doubt. Then you start collecting red flags like souvenirs, until one day you realize you've been building a relationship on shifting sand. And this is where Stoicism draws the line with absolute clarity. Seneca once wrote, "Truth is the first lesson of friendship, because without truth, there is no relationship. There's only performance, only illusion." People often say they lie to protect your feelings, but what they're really protecting is their convenience. They lie because the truth would cost them effort, or accountability, or the image they've worked hard to sell you. Let's be clear, there are many forms of dishonesty. There's omission, what they choose not to say. There's minimization, it's not a big deal. There's deflection, why are you always so paranoid? And there's betrayal wrapped in kindness, saying the right things while doing the wrong ones behind your back. All of it has the same effect. You begin to lose your footing. You start second-guessing your memory. And worst of all, you stop trusting your own judgment. That's not just emotional. That's neurological. Studies show that repeated exposure to deception weakens your confidence in your perception of reality. That's not love. That's sabotage. So what does a Stoic do in the face of dishonesty first? You stop listening to words. You start watching behavior. Because people lie with words. But truth always leaks through actions. Second, you stop fixing them. Their dishonesty is not your burden to carry. You don't need another talk. You need a decision. Third, you reclaim your clarity. You write down the contradictions. You re-anchor to your truth. And you let the silence between you grow, not out of anger, but out of respect for your own peace. Because here's the harsh truth. When someone repeatedly lies to you, they are telling you, without saying a word, your trust is disposable. Your peace is negotiable. Your clarity is optional. And your response must be final. Not anymore. It starts with a smile, a laugh. A just kidding. Maybe you laugh along. Maybe you force a grin. But something tightens in your chest. Something deep inside you says, that wasn't funny. That was aimed, and it was. Disrespect, disguised as humor, is one of the most socially accepted forms of emotional abuse. It slips under the radar. It doesn't shout. It snickers. It hides its blade behind a punchline, and if you flinch, they say you're too sensitive. Sound familiar? You're not overreacting. You're being baited. I remember a woman who once said, "It wasn't the insult that finally broke me. It was realizing I had spent 20 years laughing at my own humiliation just to keep the peace." Let that sink in. Here's the trick. People who hide cruelty behind jokes know exactly what they're doing. They study your insecurities. Then they shape their humor to target them carefully. Consistently. I was just being honest. Come on. Don't be dramatic. If you can't take a joke. But let me ask you this. If the joke only lands one way, if the only one laughing is the one holding the knife, is that humor? No. That's domination in disguise. The Stoics had a very different idea of how words should be used. Marcus Aurelius said, "Let your words be few and well chosen, like a physician's knife used to heal, not to wound." So let's be clear. Brutal honesty isn't a virtue. It's a mask for emotional laziness. Real honesty is courageous but also kind. It doesn't mock. It doesn't humiliate. It builds, even when it's uncomfortable. So how do you respond when the joke cuts deeper than the surface? You stop laughing. You stop validating cruelty with silence. You don't need to argue. You don't need to explain. You can simply say, "That felt disrespectful," and then let the discomfort land where it belongs with them. Because here's the Stoic truth: you do not owe anyone your tolerance for disrespect, even if they're family. Especially if they're family. If someone consistently hides poison in their punchlines, you don't have to sip it just to keep the peace. You are not the uptight one. You are not the difficult one. You are the one who has finally had enough. And that is not weakness. That is strength disguised as dignity. You've just walked through 5 behaviors that can quietly dismantle your spirit. Constant criticism, boundary violations, emotional manipulation, chronic dishonesty, and disrespect disguised as jokes. None of them leave bruises, but all of them leave damage. And the most dangerous part, they often come from people we trust the most. A partner who says they love you but erodes your self-worth piece by piece. A family member who weaponizes guilt and calls it care. A friend who uses your silence as permission to keep crossing the line. But here's the truth, and it's hard to hear. What you tolerate, you teach. And every time you say nothing, every time you choose peace over your own voice, you're teaching them that your boundaries are optional, but not anymore. Because now you know better. And Stoicism isn't about being cold or passive. It's not about swallowing pain or pretending nothing affects you. It's about clarity. It's about agency. It's about knowing where your peace ends and someone else's chaos begins. Marcus Aurelius didn't teach us to endure everything. He taught us to see things as they are and act accordingly. That means you get to choose who has access to your energy, who gets a seat at your table, and who no longer qualifies to speak into your life. You don't need permission to protect your peace. You need courage. So, here's your next step. Start with one line, one boundary, one truth you've been holding back. Maybe it's finally saying, "I don't find that funny," or "That's not okay with me anymore." Maybe it's deciding that silence is no longer the path to survival, but the sound of your self-respect returning. Whatever it is, let it be real, because when you stop tolerating what hurts you, you start building a life that honors you. And in that space, you don't just survive, you rise. If this video resonated with you, leave a comment. Share your story. Someone out there needs to know they're not the only one. Like this video if you felt seen. Subscribe to Think Stoic 101 for more insights that protect your peace, sharpen your mind, and strengthen your spirit. And remember, this isn't about becoming harder. It's about becoming wiser, because you were never meant to be everyone's emotional punching bag. You were meant to stand tall, to speak truth, and to draw the line with love, with calm, and with power.